Okay, thank you so
Right.
much for joining in, George. I'm really
Yeah.
excited that you took out time for us to have this conversation. It's really important to me that I have these kind of conversations with people like you, right? And when I mean people like you, is people like you that have done good things and great things for their career path, for life, and generally, in life. So I'd like to have this conversation so that we can, at the least, inspire people that are trying to throw this part. So I really find these conversations interesting and relevant. So we're just going to dive straight in, right? And
Yeah.
I'll let you do more of the talking. So I always like to
Hopefully,
start
that's
like this,
interesting.
right? So beneath the surface, who is George Osai? Now, I know you as my G, my friend, my brother, but I mean, let my audience get to know you. Who is George Osai beneath the surface?
I think, like I mentioned before, the tricky part about that question is particularly putting a definition to what the surface is, right? And
Okay.
if I was a celebrity, maybe what that would mean would be beyond what people would see in the public domain who I am. But because I'm not a celebrity, I'm going to just take liberties and interpret that question the way I see fit. Um, I think I will speak about it from the point of view of my sort of values that people might not necessarily see on maybe social media or on their sort of surface dealings with me. I think at the very core, I'm very optimistic. I'm a very optimistic person. At the very core, I'm a very optimistic person. Um, I kind of feel like it's what drives most of the things I do in life. Um, that thing they say about what would you do if you were 100% certain that it would work. Um, that's how I see life. I believe that everything I do will work, even if most don't. But it's nice to believe that from the start. And I think that's one
Mm.
of the biggest driving forces for me as I've sort of journeyed through life. Um, I sort of believe a lot in family, not family in the context of blood, but family in the context of sustainability and success. Because I kind of see life that you can't be successful alone. There's always a community aspect of life that makes success sustainable. So I think I'm a very optimistic person. I think I believe in a huge sense of community. That sort of seeps through in terms of what I see in the good in people, trying to empower people, and realizing that the fact that I am somewhere doesn't particularly mean being successful unless the people that are linked to you can also get to that level. As they say, a system is as good as its weakest link. And if you think that you're somewhere and you're not able to sort of look at the people within your link, within your community, and do something and contribute, then it might be that your success is not sort of sustainable. It would be short lived. So yeah, beyond beneath the surface, I'm a very optimistic person. I believe in a huge sense of community. And I think those are the key driving forces for whatever I've done in the last 12 to 15 years.
It's interesting you say community because
Yeah.
I personally am a huge fan of communities, right? I feel like there is only so much we live for beyond living in communities, right? So when our life have meaning, for the most part, it has to do with reaching out to the next person, adding value to the next person, right? So
Yeah.
community just makes sense in general for me. So thank you so much for giving us that. Being an optimistic person, being a person that values community makes all the sense to me, right?
Yeah.
Now, tell us how it all started. The George Osai right now that we know. So you tell us the George Osai right now, right? That is talking with me. What you do, who you are, and where you currently are based, right? And
Yeah.
how it all started, how you got here. There are lots of things I could say about you, but I mean, it will make more sense to come from you. So tell us, how did it all start?
Um, Currently, an audit assistant manager working with KPMG here in the UK, specifically sort of in the southeast, Watford, London, Milton Keynes area. I've been here for 2+ years. Most of my clients are sort of private capital, small scale, medium scale businesses, and a few other listed businesses, particularly in retail and a few other large companies in healthcare. I think a chunk of the work I've done in the last, say, 12 months is around retail clients and healthcare. Um, Cumulatively, I've been in audit 7 years, or I'm counting. I started out my career in KPMG Nigeria back in 2016. And before that, there was a bit of finding myself after uni, because I sort of dabbled into a couple of things, graphic designs, web designs. I sort of did software engineering for a bit, but if it was frustrating, and hopefully we get to somewhere in this conversation where I'm able to sort of delve deeper into that. I did a bit of 3D animations because these were things that I was passionate about, and I probably still am. But as I grew older, because I think I finished uni somewhere around 22, quite young, ready to take on the world. But then you go out into the world and realize that oftentimes the path to your destination isn't a straight one. It's a bit crooked. You have to have that flexibility, openness, and humility to actually allow yourself to be derailed as necessary just to get to where you're going to. I think I've had a bit of that. I had a bit of that between 20 and 24. And before that, this is what surprises people the most. I didn't study an accounting course or any finance related course, even if I did have business acumen and I did do business in uni. I studied environmental biology in uni, straight jacket 4 year course, and never had any joy for medicine. Never wanted to do medicine because a lot of people say, most people who end up in the environmental biology probably wanted to do medicine and then couldn't sort of make the cut, and then they sort of fell to environmental biology. So yeah, on the record, no, I never applied for medicine. I applied for environmental biology in two schools, the University of Port Harcourt and then, of course, Nigeria Delta University, and went on to pick Nigeria Delta University simply because it was far from home. I wanted to get away from my parents, and they called me first. So I think that's kind of like the summary of my professional journey. After I finished uni and of course the mandatory youth service, there was a bit of 1 year plus where I was figuring out things to do, sort of how to pretty much navigate life as a 24-year-old individual in Nigeria back then in 2015, 2016. It took a bit of time before I decided to move to Lagos to take up the job. And yeah, that's how the journey began.
Interesting. So
yeah,
at what point did you know it was going to be auditing? At what point did you decide? And what were the factors that helped you decide? So you studied environmental biology, right?
Yeah.
While you did a bit of business in school, that wasn't your core, right? So how did you navigate that phase where you had to decide to do something this deep in accounting? Just tell us a bit about that.
There's an inside joke amongst us where we say nobody wakes up at 10 and say my dream is to be an auditor, right? And it's true, right? A lot of people would say they love their job, which is factual, right? Because you get to a point where you're doing really important things, sort of you're doing a lot of public good, even if people might not see it like that because of sort of the pathway it takes to get to the level where the public actually benefits from it. But we do a lot of public good, and you work with some of the smartest people in the world, and you get to a point where you do love it. But nobody wakes up as a 10, 15-year-old saying my dream is to be an auditor. Some people have dreams of being an accountant. Obviously, that wasn't me because I didn't even study an accounting course. I think for me, when I wanted to join KPMG, I sort of knew very little about the firm. Did a quick Google search and I saw a couple of things, and I saw auditing. And back then, someone told me that, oh, you have to pick auditing because they take the most people. And yes, that's how it started. I picked audit because I had a greater chance of getting an offer from KPMG back then, because back then they would employ like maybe 150 plus people on an annual basis in audit. Now, obviously, I didn't have as much information because the options then were audit, advisory, and tax. I knew I didn't want to do tax because I just had like a bad notion about tax people. Advisory, I didn't know what it was. And of course, I would later come to find out that what I really wanted to do was something called management consulting in advisory. But obviously, I didn't know that. And I didn't even have the opportunity. Now, who knows, maybe I wouldn't have made the call because sometimes management consulting would typically hire what 10, 15 people. And for people like me who didn't sort of attend the big schools in the world, we probably would not stand a chance. So yeah, I guess I don't think about that much because I love what I do. I enjoy what I do now. Well, yeah, that's kind of like how it started, and it just sort of took off from there. And maybe at some point again in this talk we'll delve into some of the qualities that have made it take off for me, and hopefully be able to share with people out there to sort of also implement in their own life.
Cool. Sounds great, George. Thank you. So when you say no one makes a decision to want to be an auditor, I like the sound of that, because it was not until what, I think 2014, 2015, before I started hearing the word as an auditor being a career path, as a matter of fact, let alone wanting to be one, you know. So I think that, so now before we get a little deeper, what were some things
We're not deep yet.
we are not deep yet. So what made you decide that you were going to, now I know that our landscape, you know, our economic landscape would make people want to take on just about any job, right? But was there something for you that made you decide you were going to take on auditing in KPMG?
Oh no, there was absolutely nothing. It was about KPMG. I went for the exam and it had a very big building. It was a 13-story building in VI. Yeah, no kidding. I think it was somewhere around the middle of May 2016. I went for the exam and they had this really nice building. It's one of those ones where when you watch Hollywood movies, you'd be like, whoa, maybe like the smartest people in the world would typically work here. Not people like us who came from a university that was less than 15 years old at the time. So we didn't stand a chance. So I got there, saw the building, I'm like, oh, this is a really beautiful building and I want to work here. And that's when I started, because for me, it was just one more adventure, right? I don't think I started the process with the mindset that it would actually come to fruition. It was more around an ambitious young man just sort of casting the net out there and hoping that you catch something. And then when I saw the building, I was like, no, now this is the fish I want to catch. And I sort of took it more seriously afterward because it was around 5 stages, right? Exams and interviews. So I think it was the building that I wanted to work in, the prestige that sort of came with being in the Harborough area of Lagos State and wearing a suit and tie, you know, just living the dream. And I was hoping to make a lot of money, even if that sort of turned out to be a sort of a false notion. But yeah, those were some of my motivations. Not very noble, but I mean, like I said in the beginning, the path to your destination isn't very straightforward, and you have to embrace it. You have to embrace those sort of crooked paths with humility and sort of faith.
So, talking out just on that thought, what are some twists and turns that you've had to experience in your career growth? Now, not just joining KPMG, but in the general career growth that has helped you become who you are today.
Yeah, I mean, for most of my work life, I have worked with KPMG, Nigeria, and then obviously now in the UK. And when you talk about twists and turns, it's usually amongst 2 or 3 things, right? I think when you work for a place like KPMG, there is a lot of exposure in terms of the quality of the clients that you work with. Sometimes in your first year, you could be doing something that people in smaller firms takes them 15 years to do. So it's more of an accelerated growth, right? And after your first year, you are probably putting that mindset that you have to work hard so you can take advantage of those growth sort of opportunities. I think one of the biggest challenges that I have faced in my career is around judging myself that I wasn't growing fast enough. And for someone like me who came from a course where there were very little numbers, my first year, I sort of struggled with the whole doing a job that required me to crunch numbers on a daily basis, right? And that obviously, now that I've done it for 7 years, I realized that it was all unfounded because it's really not about numbers. It's about understanding businesses and being able to help them. But I found myself in the place where I had that fear. And then I looked at people who studied accounting because back then when we joined, there were people who were 21 and they were qualified accountants. And I was just
Mhm.
here needing another 3, 4 years to get there. So there is that whole point of having low self-esteem and then that translating into your work. I think another thing I struggled with early on was having sort of performance conversations where you think you've done great work and you sort of have your yardstick for measuring your work you've done, and then you get to the points where you're having performance conversations that determine your pay and your promotion, and you're hearing something else from the people you work with. And it was a bit disappointing. And I think I took an emotional view to it initially, which obviously I've taken the next couple of years to work through, and I'm in a much better place. So I think those were the two sort of key things that I struggled with. That whole syndrome of feeling inferior because you feel like you're amongst people that are much better than you, and then just my own performance management.
Great, great, George. So, and I'd like us to stay around this a little bit, right?
Yeah,
So, I know that it's not it's not rosy anyway in any career. You would have to work hard uh, to get the juice from that career, right? From when you
yeah,
start, you know, from when you start until the top of the ladder, you always have to work hard. So what were some I don't want to call them tricks, but if you have some tricks in your pocket, right, that helped you navigate these phases, right? Not for you, you mentioned judging yourself for not growing fast enough, being dealing with numbers and all of that, and then having performance conversations. All of those things are real that people deal with currently. So if you
yeah,
were to give some pointers, what would you say that people could use for navigating such situations?
yeah. I think I'll talk about the performance one because I've particularly seen a lot of commentary more recently around it because it seems as though, because I follow a lot of career pages, and I think it seems as though people don't understand what it really means to grow in an organization. The concept, especially for those of us that are Africans, is you think you do great work and then you get the reward for the great work and then you get promoted for the great work. But that's not particularly true. And a lot of people miss this out and they spend years in a place where they feel like they're overworking themselves and they're not getting monetary gain from it or sort of career growth. But here's how I'd like to put it, right? It's about performance and it's about relationship. Relationships are more important than performance. Not because performance is not important, but relationship is just more important. And someone would go, oh, well, I'm not that kind of person. I just want to do my work and go home. I'm not friends with my coworkers. Well, here's how you need to look at it, right? Whatever your definition of career growth is, it is something that is a limited resource. Your company probably cannot promote 50,000 people every year, right? They don't have the resources to do that. So the concept is that whatever it is you're looking for, a few other people are also looking for it, right? And
Mm-hmm.
if you think that it should be based on hard work, what I would tell you is there is a baseline for someone to be able to do a job. So, for example, if I wanted to hire a security man, he should he should look big. He shouldn't look small that people can easily sort of just maybe get past it or without him being able to stop them, right? But
Mm-hmm.
apart from that, the requirement from a security man, I don't need you to have a PhD, right? I don't need you to, oh, I need you to be able to stand if you need to stand. They're like basic requirement. Anything on top of that is just extra, but it's not needed to do the job. What people tend to do is that, oh, I'm this, I do this, I do that, I do that. He doesn't do that. Why was he promoted? And the question I'll ask you is this. The reason of my response to that question is he was promoted because he can do the job that he's been promoted to do, and the boss likes him. Right? Doesn't seem fair, but it is. That's the reality. It's not fair, and this is how I tend to explain it to people. If your boss had a challenge at night, right? If he had a challenge, if he ever had a challenge about something that would make the business lose, say, $10 million overnight, if it's not fixed within 2 hours, do you both have a relationship that he can pick up a phone and call or text you? Now, the truth is, I've never had to get it, like take a call from any of my bosses in my 7 years of working. I probably never will. But it's a hypothetical situation to say, do I trust you enough to give you a bigger position? And people think trust, and I think we've had this conversation before, trust, it's not about just your skill. It's your skill and your integrity largely. But then if you break that down to workplace, when your boss says, I trust this person, it's that whatever happens, this person would be able to deliver the job. So I tell people, if you struggle with growth, I mean, obviously there are workplaces where they just don't appreciate your work, and I would tell you totally, you have to move. But when you're in a workplace where people are constantly being promoted and people are sort of getting job satisfaction from there, and for some weird reason you're the only person who isn't, you need to think about your relationships, because in performance conversations department, and I've attended so many of them, people will have to speak for you, right? Over the course of your career, you do great work, you do good work, you do not so great work. It's all about what's more important to the person speaking on your behalf, because they will, if someone wants you to grow, they can highlight your strength in those meetings, right? And push you forward. And if someone doesn't care about you because you don't have a relationship with them, what they would remember is the thing that you didn't do so well. Is that fair? Probably not. But that's how humans are. When you sort of go to a ratings website, you see a lot of bad reviews. It's not because the company isn't good. It's that when you have a good encounter with a company, you don't go and start writing stuff. It's when you're angry because of a bad encounter, you're more inclined to go and write a review. So it's the same thing. When you work with people, you do good stuff, you do bad stuff. The bad stuff just sticks more, right? People say performance evaluation is objective. I don't think it is. It's maybe 20% objective, and it's largely 80% sort of based on how the person feels about you. So if I don't have a good feeling about you, even if it's not fact-based, I'm not inclined to speak on your behalf. So I guess people just need to sort of understand that on the performance side. Now, in terms of math skill, I don't think everyone has a math skill, but I think that when you do start a new job, you'd have different challenges in terms of your skill. I think that the first advice is you have to be patient with yourself, but it doesn't stop there, right? My thing and my mantra is I don't care how talented someone is, I will outwork you, right? And it's important to, or it's the reason why it works for me is that a lot of people don't like to work. Like majority of people don't like the idea of working. And obviously that's because of where we've come from as humans, where it used to be about survival, and then capitalism came and became a thing about striving for more. But in our natural state, our primal states, it's not about being president or sort of building 10 houses. It was just about you survive, you provide for your family, you take care of your kids, and then you live life. So I understand that, but in the modern world, work is required, skills is required, character is required, and then obviously there is luck, right? I think that you need a bit of luck. So if you put these things together and say that I'm going to be patient with myself, but then I'm going to outwork the average person out there. Over time, there are gains, and then you realize that you start to climb up the ladder.
So this is so great because it leads me to my next question. So
Interesting.
So there is such a concept about ass kissing, right, in the workplace, right?
Yeah,
So
it's
kissing ass. So how do we differentiate between wanting to build these genuine relationships and
yeah.
ass kissing in the workspace?
It's a blurry line, but
Okay, please
Yeah.
go ahead, sir.
It's a blurry line, but I think that it's one of those things where when you do it, you realize which part of the divide you fall into, right? I think the first thing is I don't think you should build relationship with people that have different values from you, because in the whole process you lose yourself. But I'd like to think that if you work in an organizations that that takes their values seriously, most of the people they would hire and most of the people that will be there in senior positions should be people with values that sort of align to yours. Obviously, if not, then you're in the wrong place, right? So I don't think that if you're someone with integrity as a core value, you would want to be in an organization that sells drugs or does something illegal, right? Such that for you to mingle with the upper ups, you have to pretty much get your hands dirty, if you get what I mean. So I'd like to think that a chunk of the people you work with should loosely have the same values with you, such that on the average, if you have a relationship with them, it's not going to compromise you from from a moral point of view. Now, in terms of differentiating between building those relationship and ass licking, I think my key thing is if you have to lose yourself to please someone, then you're probably ass kissing, right? If you so I've seen people who they've got a game to see in a stadium or they've booked a ticket to something and then they're sitting in the office because their boss is there. And I'm like, no, it doesn't work like that. People would respect you only to the extent that you respect yourself. And obviously, you've earned that respect from them. So, skipping a game you've paid for just to be in the office isn't going to help you, right? They're going to see you as a people pleaser. And I think a lot of people can sniff someone who's a people pleaser. And even if they might not want to do it, you find yourself being used in a way that you don't like or you don't respect. So I guess the key thing is build relationship, but put forward the things you can do. People should see that it's not just you benefiting from the relationship that you're trying to build with them, but they also will benefit from that same relationship based on the things that you can do with your position, right? So if it's mutual, right? If you can clearly sort of outline the usefulness of that relationship to both parties, you're most likely building a reasonable relationship. But if you can't, such that the benefit is only coming from the person on top, while for you to balance up the relationship, you have to do things that you probably would not do on a normal basis, then you're probably ass kissing.
George, so we all, of course, we all have our fair share of life's difficult
Yeah.
moments, right? And
Yeah.
I personally have had my share.
Yeah.
I don't even know if I have some form of template, but let me throw this your way. Do you have
Yeah.
a framework, sort of a template for dealing with difficult situations? So a difficult boss, difficult clients, just difficult. I mean, difficult, really difficult, right? Not some uncomfortable situation, really
Yeah.
difficult situations. You have sort of like a template or a method that our people can learn from.
Yeah. I think the first thing and probably the most important thing, and I appreciate that this might not come naturally to people based on personality. The first thing is you can't be emotional about things, especially when it comes to a problem before you. You're hardly ever going to be in a position where the more emotional you get, the more ideas you get to solve it. So I think for some people, I think for me, it comes to me naturally where, and my mom, growing up, my mom would always say this. She uses the word lackadaisical. To be honest, I've never really checked the meaning of that word, right? But growing up, my mom used to say this thing where I'm so carefree about things that if this house was burning down, I would walk out instead of run. And that's kind of like for me personally, things would hardly get to me emotionally. It's like if the world likes let it burn, I'm going to be standing and thinking about what to do about it as opposed to crying or now I know that comes to me naturally and that's my personality, but I appreciate the fact that for a lot of people out there, it's going to be hard work. But I think the key message you need to realize is you can't be in that emotional state and solve most of the problems life will throw at you. there's a bit of objectivity that is required. There's a bit of boldness. There's a bit of courage. Now, to be honest, I don't think these things are mutually exclusive to being emotional. However, I just see that sometimes being overly emotional sort of hinders you from considering these other qualities that you need for problem solving. Having said that, from a framework point of view, and I think I was doing this growing up, but it became clearer when I sort of read one of Stephen Covey's book. I think it's Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. I'm not sure if it's that one or the other book, where he talks about uh, it's a circle. So visualize a circle, three circles. The outside one is your circle of concern. Circle of concern is basically the things that concern you. So obviously, if you have a challenge, if you say something is challenging, it's difficult, or your client is speaking to you in a condescending manner, you've got a customer that is asking for a refund after you've delivered the product, or stuff like that, or someone is threatening to sue you for something really unreasonable. It's a difficult situation. So at minimum, it concerns you. So most things are in your circle of concern. And I think if you go one step inside that circle, it's your circle of influence. So it's basically acknowledging the fact that something concerns you doesn't mean you can influence it. There's going to be the odd thing that it concerns you. When COVID came, it concerns everybody. But there isn't really much you can do about COVID, right? However, there are things that you can influence. For example, if COVID is happening and you lose a child, now that's even more difficult. So you can influence keeping your kids safe. You can influence speaking to your family, your extended family, on them keeping safe, right? Then there is the third one, the circle of control, which is like even smaller circle inside that huge framework. It's basically the things that you can actively change, the things that you can affect the course and direction that they're headed. And my thing has always been focusing on the things that I can control, and then next the things that I can influence, right? And I think that's where the real power is, right? If I've got a difficult client, the first question I need to ask is, are they being difficult because of something objective? So, for example, there's this thing in audit where if an engagement is really dragging and things are really going slow, the client starts to get paranoid. Now, oftentimes there are different reasons why an engagement would drag. I mean, the client's in giving you quality documents to do your work, or it could be an internal issue where you haven't got sort of a team to work on that project. Either way, you have to manage that situation so you get a good outcome. So sometimes your client is just angry and pissed off, and they send nasty emails. I mean, I think I remember one client emailed me and said, I can get another auditor to do the job for a fraction of your cost. Things like that. And it can get it can feel really demeaning when a client says that to you. But you need to realize and say, what can I control? And in getting to what you can control in that situation is understanding why the client is mad. And in that case, the client was mad for two reasons. The job had been dragging, we hadn't kept them up to date, largely because I was focused on another project. So you have to sort of address that. That's within your control, right? For example, well, set up a meeting, let's have a conversation. Before you get into that meeting, you have to figure out all their concerns and have response to it and have an honest conversation to say, this is the situation of things, right? By the time you address that, you start to realize that the pressure is off a bit because you faced your problem. You've not bothered about, because people do this thing where they start to catastrophize, or you get that kind of email from a client, oh my God, he's going to reach out to my boss. Oh my God, I'm not going to be promoted. Oh my God. And then you realize that you're focusing on things that you can't control. You're focusing on things that concern you, but you have no influence over. So if you just take a step back and go, in all this catastrophe going on, what do I have control over? And putting all your energy and face it headlong. What I always find is that things start to ease out a bit, because I think that we're naturally pessimistic, and it might have come from the fact that we needed to be pessimistic to survive in the wild, right? Where you don't want to try something new. You take a bad situation and think about it as worse, and that's how you survive, frankly speaking. But I think that we take situations and we make them really, really bad in our head. They're usually worse than they are. And I remember getting an email from one of my engagement partners a few years ago, and it was in the evening, like 7 p.m. He sent it to me that, oh, let's discuss the next morning. In my head, I thought about maybe 10 different things that I've done wrong, blah, blah, blah. And then I got into the office first thing the next day, and I was like, oh yeah, I saw I was doing a good work in this project. He wanted me to take up something new. And I'm like, I literally lost sleep over the same email last night. And I think we do that a lot, right? We would rather worry about a problem than even take steps to solve it. So my thing is always identify what you can control, identify what you can influence, and then go to work. It might not work out all the time, but obviously you would always get better results if you focus on sort of changing small things as opposed to crying about the big things. And again, there's the odd concept of, would it matter 5 years from now? To be honest, most of the things we cry about wouldn't matter. So I think I get to a point where I just don't care. Whatever wants to happen should happen. And yeah, my thing is oftentimes you just have to zoom out of the problem, right? Because if you're too close to the problem, your emotions sort of cloud a lot of your judgment, and you're not really thinking about solutions as you should. It's more around you're thinking of an emotional response and you're bringing a lot of things that don't matter into the picture. So yeah, if you use the 5 years test, will it matter 5 years from now? It wouldn't. Dissociate yourself emotionally from the situation. It helps to start to think about real solutions for yourself. And I tell a lot of people, involve the people that you trust. If you find yourself in a place where you can't move, getting that sort of additional perspective. Sometimes you've been thinking about the whole thing wrong, right? And getting someone who's knowledgeable, someone you trust into the conversation might even help you unlock something that you've never thought about.
George, so I immediately looked up the word lackadaisical.
Yes. Tell me,
And it
what does it
means
mean?
lacking enthusiasm and determination, carelessly lazy.
He has to be. I think he meant carelessly lazy.
Carelessly
He has to
lazy.
be. Yeah, he has to be the one he meant.
I like it. Immediately you said it, I'm like, okay, I'm going to check off this word because I've used the word before, or I've heard the word before too, but I'm not sure I really knew what it meant. Okay, so you've just brilliantly given me some framework for handling difficult situations, and I really do appreciate this because I I mostly am doing this also to learn from my guests, right? So, and this again, that's why you see me once in a while. I just scribble down something because I am taking down notes. Of course, this is notes with Dave, so I have to take down notes myself.
Yeah, you
So
have to jot things down.
I have to jot things down. So I let's talk a bit about the other end. What are what's like a framework for success for you, right? And I know that success may be different for different people, right? But generally in life, what is the framework for achieving things that you set your mind to achieve?
Um, I think largely from a if we wanted to put it in a framework, I think there are four key things. I mean, it's three, but then I probably would have mentioned it somehow. I think first of all, it's your skill, and I think people are starting to see how important being skillful at something is over the last couple of years. Growing up, it was more around you're going to get a job somewhere and you'll be fine anyways. Um, I think over the last 10 years, we've seen that no, you won't be fine because the people who earn the most money are people who are skillful at something. It doesn't matter, right? And we can come to picking what you're skillful at as a separate conversation. So I think the first thing is be skillful at something because it's always just a waste of time trying to do something that you sort of have no skill in and probably have no passion in. So that's the first thing. The other thing is what your definition of hard work is needs to be something that puts you above the average person in that thing you're looking to do. Now, I would have easily said hard work, right? But I think it's very ambiguous to say hard work because the concept of hard work can be easily translated to, just putting yourself through stuff that you don't need to put yourself through. That's why I said what your definition of hard work needs to be something that puts you above the average person in the thing you're looking to do. And I think there's character. Character, it's a bit broad, but I think some of the characteristics that are very important when I'm doing something is it's willpower, just having that mental strength to push through the difficult times, because it will come. And I see that in every project where it starts off really easy and then you get into the deep end and it's just like, I'd rather be sleeping on my bed than doing this thing at 10 p.m. at night, right? But I think having the mental strength and character to keep going when it's most difficult, it's very important. And I think, fourthly, at the center of it all, you need to be lucky. Now, the reason why I put it at the center is because it feels like you don't have a role to play in your luck, but I think that you make your own luck by being skillful, being hardworking, and maintaining a level of character that sort of fits into the results you're looking to get. So I think you need to be lucky. There's a lot of things that just happens by being at the right place at the right time. But obviously, you can't take advantage of them if you're not a hard worker. You can't take advantage of them if you haven't got skill, and you can't take advantage of them if you haven't got the character. I think at the very base, that's my framework. However, how to put this in motion, obviously, it's the most important thing, and it's a phrase that I always tell MC. It's at the short term. The most important thing is intensity. And in the long run, the most important thing is consistency. And each time I look at people try something or they do something, it gets difficult, they fail. That's usually the challenge, right? They're not intense, like they do things, I call them part-time warriors, right? You do it and then you don't do it again for a long time, then you come back, you do it a bit, and then you disappear. You can't get a result like that, to be honest. It's just not going to happen unless you're some genius who needs 2 minutes to solve a long-standing math problem. But for most people, it's your time. The time you put into something would sort of translate. And I always say this, that if I look at a 50-year-old person, if there was data to sort of say every single thing they've done in their life and say this is the action you took and this is the time you used to take that action. If I map that in a pie chart or in a box plot or anything like that, I would easily see what they become, because you're pretty much what you spend most of your time doing, and there's no magic to it, there's no trick to it. It's a simple concept, but it is what it is. If you put in time into something over time, you would see that you're different to the person who just comes in, does it once in a while and disappears, right? So like I said, short term, it's intensity. In the long run, it's consistency. Now, it's difficult to be intense every single time for a very long period of time. It is difficult. So you get to the point where some days it's just about showing up and doing something for 30 minutes, right? Or sometimes it's just about, I don't feel like being in the office, but showing up, contributing in the way you can and saying, you know what, I think I have to head off early today. Those days are the days where you need the idea or you need the mindset of consistency, realizing that any meaningful result, any meaningful objective, you need to be consistent to get there. So it then means that, and the reason I say this is, you don't want to be those people who come in and, oh, I want to be I want to be a footballer, for example, right? When you first had that goal, you show up in the field every day, you train, you do this, and 1 month later you stop, right? Because, well, you were tired or whatever, you just stop and then you don't come back again to it 6 months. What it should be is, 1 month later, I'm tired. Oh, that's fine. I will tone down my training for a bit, step it down, but I will still show up, right? And then you realize that 2 weeks from then, oh, well, you feel like you're good as new and you pick up the intensity again. So that's the whole concept of skills, work, character, luck. In the short term, intensity. In the longer term, consistency. So that's my framework. And every time I have to do a project or something, I always bring that framework to say, do I have the skills for this? Am I willing to work hard for this? And do I have the character to pursue this? The luck you don't have control over, so you ignore it and hope that if you do these other bits, you get lucky. And then, of course, intensity in the short term, and over the longer term, I stay consistent.
You probably should write a book about these things. It sounds so good. I think everybody should hear it.
I'll keep that in
Now,
mind.
on to the next. I don't even know if this is a valid question in itself, but
Yeah.
I want to sort of, I personally want to learn, right? So if it's not, maybe you could correct me. Do you find the need to balance work and play? And if you do, how do you do it?
To be honest, that's probably one of the most difficult things for people who work in the corporate world. It remains an ongoing conversation because it's a real challenge, right? You find yourself in the middle of you're working on a very important project, and delivering that project would mean a lot for you career wise. But then also, you've got family, you've got friends, and you need to recharge. Now, the way I tend to look at this, and this is purely based on my work, is that most of the busy times are seasonal, right? And I think for most jobs, I mean, you're not going to be like busy all year round. If you are, then you're probably in the wrong job, or you're probably being overworked. You are going to find yourself where you have periods where you're able to scrape out 6, 7 hours of sleep, right? 5 days a week. And then you're going to find yourself in periods where it's a bit sort of softer and you can plan things. The way I look at it is two ways. I think first things first, you have to be honest with the people in your life, right? In terms of they need to be informed about what's going on. So you don't want to have a kid who doesn't understand why you're not following him to the games, right? For between January to March, right? However, if you have a conversation and say by April, I'm going to have time to start taking you to the games. So it means that they make sacrifices because you are making sacrifices to keep the ball rolling and sort of keep the wheels moving. And then also the other aspect is being honest with the people that you work with about what you can do and when you can do it. Um, Most of these challenges comes from trying to meet expectations that are not realistic. And if you're not having that conversation, thinking that, oh no, I can do it, I can do it, well, no, you can't. The concept in the corporate world, people would say under promise and over deliver. And I think for those of you who also do freelancing, it's also a thing because you don't want to put yourself in pressure, under pressure to do something that you could do it, but then you've really given yourself little room for error and little margins, and then it becomes really difficult to meet those expectations you set for yourself. So, um, my thing is always be honest with the people in your life and then be realistic about the goals and expectations that you sell at work. The rest of it, it's just, trying to sort of get sleep when you do have the time, because there's always this thing I find, and I've had to learn this the hard way, where if you have a period where you're really busy with work, even when you're not busy with work, it's so difficult for you to still rest. You start to fall into bad habits like, or, you're just on your phone for a very long period of time because you feel like you've missed this level of entertainment. And then you realize that even though you're away from work, you're actually not resting the body. You're not getting good sleep. You're not eating good food, and you're not sort of going out to sort of enjoy nature. And you return to work even more tired than you were when you left. And then it's a lot more difficult to even balance the work and the life then, because now there's work and now there's life, and the people in your life know that, oh well, we haven't gone out in a while, or we're supposed to see this football game, or we haven't eaten out in a while, and it's really difficult. So I think there is obviously the aspect of taking care of your body, sleep well, eat good food, right? And then obviously there's the aspect of the people in your life, having honest conversation about your availability when you're busy. Sometimes it's just, oh, next week I'm going to be really busy. Oh, this is what's going to happen. But then afterwards, let's do this as just a way to recharge. So that level of honesty with the people in your life is very important. I'm not saying they will understand all the time, but I think that for most people, because they love you and they realize the importance of what you do, they are more sort of likely to back you when you're open about it. And then when you do say you spend time with them, then obviously you should 100% be there.
What role does football have in all of this, George? This
Well, for
George, I'm
me,
having the conversation with.
for me, it's like, so I play football. I watch football. I watch the preview of a game. I watch the review of a game. I play fantasy football. my life revolves around a lot. So when it comes to what's the thing you do to sort of unwind, I think it's football, right? Because I've been playing football since as far back as I can remember. Wondering why I didn't make a career out of it. I don't know. I don't know. I've never thought about it. But it's important to me because it's obviously I don't think I enjoy the gym, right? I don't like the idea of sweating without any form of activity. So I'm more of I like to play football, right? You're running, you're enjoying the game, and then you're getting the needed level of exercise. And then also I'm involved in loads of fantasy league groups and things like that. So it takes up a chunk of my life. So yeah, um, there isn't so much to add to that. But when it's off season, when there's no football games, it's so difficult to actually enjoy my weekends.
Okay,
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah.
Because again, I know you to be someone that loves football a lot, and sometimes I wonder, is this a part? Does this have anything to do with his life in general? Right? Does it play a role in your success generally? Um, I, I think it's interesting. Thank you for that. So maybe we'll begin to wind down a bit, but just a few more questions. A lot of people that I have spoken with tend to have imposter syndrome, right? When you're not skilled enough, but you got the job, right? Have you experienced that? If you have, how did you deal with it? If you haven't, have you been around someone that has experienced it, and how did you deal with it?
I think most people in the corporate world would agree with me when I say that it's very prevalent, especially when you're starting out, and even when you're moving from one job to the other, because sometimes, or most times, the things you learn are like the core of a profession, right? So, for example, I'll use
Mhm.
a graphic design analogy, right? Where you've been using Adobe software all your life, right? You're a good graphic designer, right? And then you get to a place where they are using some weird software, and that's their in-house software. They spent millions of dollars over the last 10 years to develop that software. Now you have to learn a new software. All the shortcuts you knew, gone, useless. The only thing you have is the core of graphic design. But then from the first day you resume work, you're required to deliver high quality designs. So I think that most people who do any kind of work would always find themselves, unless you're not exploring or unless you're not challenging yourself, you find yourself in that position where you're asking questions of, am I good enough? Can I pull this off? So yes, I have been in that situation. And I think you probably would have gotten the sort of gist of it when I talked about struggling in my first year in KPMG Nigeria because, oh, I'm not the numbers guy. I didn't study accounting. I'm not qualified, blah, blah, blah. I think it's a thing, right? But now, and I speak from now from a more experienced point of view because I have been through it and I see people who join the business go through it. And it's almost like they doubt themselves and they kind of start to feel like they're not good enough. And I've seen a fair few people just come and do 3 months. I'm like, you know what? I can't do this. I don't think I'm good enough. I hold myself to a higher esteem. And because I'm not performing at that level, I have to sort of take a walk. What I would say to that is that it's not entirely bad to feel like you're not good enough. I don't think that's where the challenge is. I think there is the second aspect of, and then what? Or you feel like you're not good enough, and then what? Because it's a feeling. It's not factual, right? It's a feeling. Because if I use a graphic design analogy, you are a good graphic designer. The challenge is you haven't used these softwares before. That's what the challenge is.
Mhm.
So the feeling of not being good enough is not factual. You just haven't used the software, and people learn software, new software every day. Sometimes if you start using a new software 2, 3 months, you'll be fine, right? So if you put yourself in a position where you sort of take yourself from that high horse, right? I think that we really judge ourselves unfairly when it comes to these things. Oh, I'm supposed to be doing this by now. I gave myself this plan based on what yardstick. You woke up one day and then you give yourself these sort of checklist of things to have done before 25, but based on what, right? There are oftentimes in life, you don't even have much control over what happens in your life till like you're 15. So if you're giving yourself 25 to do this, to do that, it means you have to go through school to do a course you probably don't like, right? 4 or 5 years. You have to go to the mandatory national service, and then you have to come out into the world and figure out it's just not enough time. So you're being unfair to yourself, thinking that, oh, I'm going to be this at 25. And then when that doesn't happen, you start to think you're not good enough. Or when you start a job, you feel like, well, my previous job, I was really good at this. And now it feels like I'm at the bottom. No, be at the bottom, embrace it. That also takes the pressure off you to sort of impress anybody. Embrace it, be honest with the people you work with, and put in the work. Oftentimes, these things change very quickly. If you are skillful in what you do, or at least if you're skillful at the core, as I define it, then the other bells and whistles are going to come to you with time. So the moment you deal with the people you work with in that honesty to say, this is how I feel, and this is the reason why I feel this way, right? You're going to have to give me a bit of allowance, right? But this is my plan for the next 2, 3 months. This is what I want to achieve. I think that for the most part, and every single time I've had that conversation with the people I work with, they always sort of embraced it. And again, I always tell people, I feel like we overestimate or we underestimate how kind people are, right? And I
Mm.
understand that it's the world we live in, right? A lot of bad things happen, but for the most part, no one's out there hoping for you to fail. Or the people you work with would want you to succeed because obviously it's more money in their pockets, right? So when you approach a job thinking they're out to get me, HR is out to get me, my boss are out to get me, my colleagues are out to get me, you're almost bound to not get good results from it. But if you take a different view, if you take a different perspective to say, my success here would also translate to the success of the people I work with and to the people I report to and the things that I'm responsible for. And it means that the people that have the responsibility to make sure you succeed will do what's right for you to succeed. I think things start to change a bit, and then over time, it compounds. You know, your hard work, your core skills, and just having that support of the people around you can be very transformational for you.
What's one important thing that you think we haven't talked about here today?
What's one important thing? I think we've sort of touched on a lot of things, but I think it's probably important to expand on the whole idea of people taking shortcuts and people sort of understanding that most of the things that matter the most in life will not happen in a week or a month or 6 months. And I kind of want to highlight that because I speak to a lot of people on a weekly basis, you know, younger people, older people. And for the older people, one thing I always see is that they spend 10, 15, 20 years, you know, you do one thing for 2 months, you do this one for 3 months. It's like, oh, well, this is going to give me money, quick money here, quick money there. And as at the time they were doing it, it looked good, right? Well, I'm getting an extra buck here and there. But you always need to think about how things add up. And I always tell people, if something is not adding up, you're wasting your time. Now, I understand that you can find yourself in a situation in life where you just need to survive, which is absolutely fine. Embrace it, right? But you need to realize that survival mode is not sustainable. So you have to figure out how to survive. And then when you have your feet on the ground, you have to then figure out how do I build something that adds up. The thing I've seen is this short termism where people figure out try to go, where does the next paycheck come from, and they sort of get glued to that mindset, and they do that for 10, 15, 20 years, and then you look at them, they're not known for anything, right? They're struggling because as you get older, you're not as strong as you used to be. So the kind of things you can get involved in is limited. So what needs to happen at that stage when you're 40, 45, 50, it's consolidation. You should have worked really hard on things that compound, building blocks that you can then sit back and enjoy, or be in a position where you're not doing the groundwork anymore, where you're now able to empower people to do that groundwork for them to sort of have gains while you also have gains from that level of consolidation. So I think that what I've seen a lot more recently is people focus on short-term things. Well, I'm just going to do this. I'm going to do this thing for 1 month and get money instead of doing that course that might put you on a career path that sort of settles the next 20 years for you. And times without number, people have regretted it because you're never going to be in a place where all the short-term things you've done suddenly add up together and boom, you win. You have to pick one thing, two things, three things where you would be known for, and you work hard at that, build relationship, build network, build influence, and then obviously build your skill to such a level where once you're 40, once you're 50, whatever that age is, people can look at you and go, oh, Dave, oh yeah, Dave is very good at that thing. This is his track record of results. But then if your results are, oh, well, you were this and you were that, people can't really put your name to something, and it gets really difficult as you get older. And that's sort of what I've seen. And I think it's really important to highlight the whole concept that for me, the point is, if it's a shortcut, right? If it feels like it's too easy, then I don't want to do it. Because the whole idea is if it's too easy, most people would be able to do it. So there's nothing special for you there. And even if it looks like there are short-term gains, it's not going to be sustainable. It's not going to last. So technically you're wasting your time, because if I give you 10 grand today, you won't have that 10 grand next year. It's gone. So if the reason I'm giving you that 10 grand is not sustainable, it means that every year you're going to need 10 grand from me for the rest of your life, right? So what's the point? And obviously, if it's easy for everyone else to do, why should I pay you 10 grand? I'll go get someone that will do 7 grand or 5 grand or 2 grand. So it then means that over time, you're not creating real value. You're just looking for shortcuts and sort of short-term gains, and it always ends bad.
George, thank you so much. This has been really insightful and inspiring. I'm really, really grateful that we had this conversation. Now, on a more casual note, right? I'll just ask you some questions on a more casual note. Do you have a favorite food? Now, I'm supposed to know this, but I mean, I just get to know.
No. To be honest, right? I mean, jollof rice would always be my go-to food, or egusi soup and beef. But I wouldn't say. People say your favorite food is something you can eat every day for whatever, for 1 month or whatever. I don't think I can have any meal I can eat every day for like a week. All right. So probably I probably do not have a favorite food. But yeah, jollof rice is up there, and egusi soup is high up the list as well.
You have a favorite color?
Blue.
Tea or coffee?
It's tricky. Over the last year, tea. But I'm starting to return to coffee gradually. So I think it's more around my state of mind. If I feel under pressure, I take coffee. And if I feel like life is good and things are easy, I take tea.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, that's very cool. Okay. Music and musician. Music genre and musician.
I'm not a music genre person, but I'm going to say it's tricky. Pop music, rap music as well. And musician, pop is tricky because there's lots of them, but I'm going to go with someone you probably don't know. I'm going to go with Keith Urban. And for rap, I'm going to go with, again, someone you probably don't know, Immortal Technique.
Say again?
Google them.
Immortal
Technique. Yeah, it doesn't sound
Immortal
like a name,
Technique.
but it's the name of it. Yeah, it's the name of a rapper. Yeah.
That's good. Thank you, George. Again, I am deeply grateful for these conversations. I personally have noted a few things down that are relevant for my journey in life, and I am really grateful that we get to do this. And I'm hoping that we can do this again. Right?
Yeah, sure.
I'm
your specimen. Your specimen. Just call me out. I'm sure. Nice
Thank you
one,
so
man.
much,
Nice one.
George. I really
Yeah, sure.
appreciate this.
Happy
Thank you.
happy to
All
do
right.
this. Yeah.